She fainted at the charity gala. 3 minutes later, the millionaire's son held her like his life depended on it. If you believe one small moment can change two lives forever, stay until the end. Now let us go back to where it all began, to our main character. The chandelier light scattered across the grand ballroom of the Manhattan Grand Hotel, painting hundreds of crystal reflections on the marble floor. Champagne glasses clinked softly. A jazz quartet played near the stage where the city's elite gathered for the annual Hale Foundation charity gala. Laughter echoed against gold-trimmed walls. Every movement was polished, rehearsed, perfect. And then there was Grace Miller, standing at the edge of all that perfection. Her dress was borrowed, her heels slightly too tight, her name tag crooked. She was not a guest. She was a junior PR assistant, here to make sure the event ran smoothly, to blend into the background and keep the donors smiling. For the past 36 hours, she had barely slept. The client was demanding, the timelines were impossible, and her heart, the same fragile heart that had been through surgeries and warning signs since childhood, was beginning to protest. But Grace pressed on. She always did. This gala was her shot at a full-time position and a bit of stability for her mother's medical bills waiting back home. At table 17, Ethan Hale watched the room through the reflective surface of his wine glass. Dark suit, calm posture, but a storm hidden in his expression. The only son of billionaire philanthropist Marcus Hale, he had attended countless events like this. Yet each year it felt emptier, a ritual of flashing cameras and hollow gratitude. He was used to attention, not connection. Until that night, a faint sound cut through the music glass, shattering on marble. Heads turned. Grace had gone pale. Her clipboard slipped from her hands as her knees gave out. The crowd froze, a sea of hesitation wrapped in designer gowns and tuxedos. Then one man moved. Ethan pushed through the guests, ignoring their startled whispers. The world narrowed to the sight of her crumpled figure on the floor, hair spilling across the marble, lips losing color. He knelt beside her and pressed 2 fingers gently to her wrist. Weak pulse. Shallow breath. "She is losing consciousness," he said firmly, looking up. "Call the paramedics. Now." No one questioned him. His voice carried authority that silenced the room. He lifted Grace carefully, one arm behind her shoulders, the other beneath her knees. Her head rested against his chest. She was light, terrifyingly light. "Stay with me," he whispered. "You are okay. You are going to be okay." For 3 long minutes, the gala's music stopped. The lights dimmed, the whispers faded, and the only sound left was the uneven rhythm of her breathing against his heart. Ethan held her tighter, as if that single act could keep her tethered to life. When the medics arrived and took her away, his hands were still trembling. Someone asked, "Mr. Hale, do you know her?" He looked down at the silver bracelet that had fallen to the floor beside him, delicate, engraved with a faint line of words he could barely read. "For every heartbeat, keep painting." Ethan slipped it into his pocket without answering. He did not know her name, but something in him already knew this moment would not let him go. As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens faded into the New York night, Ethan stood under the chandelier's flickering light, the silver bracelet warm in his palm, unaware that the woman he had just saved would soon change everything he thought he knew about kindness, privilege, and love. Stay tuned, because this is only the beginning. Let us return to Grace and the life that was about to collide with his. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us continue the story. When Grace opened her eyes, the first thing she noticed was the faint hum of machines and the sterile scent of antiseptic. The ceiling was unfamiliar, white panels with soft fluorescent lights that buzzed like distant bees. A quiet monitor beeped beside her bed. She blinked several times before realizing she was in a hospital room. Her throat felt dry, and her chest ached as if she had been running for miles. The door opened with a slow creak, and a man's voice broke the silence. "You are awake," he said softly. It was him. The man from the gala. The one whose face had hovered above hers before everything went dark. He stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, eyes filled with relief and exhaustion. "You are in the Hale medical wing," he continued. "You collapsed at the charity event. The doctors said it was exhaustion and dehydration." Grace tried to sit up, but her body protested. He moved closer, pressing the button to elevate the bed. His movements were steady, practiced, almost protective. "You were there?" she asked, voice weak. Ethan nodded. "You scared everyone half to death." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Including me." She studied his face, familiar yet distant. His presence carried calm authority, the kind that made people listen without question. "I am sorry," she murmured. "I ruined the event, did I not?" "You did not ruin anything," he replied gently. "You reminded people that charity is not just a photo opportunity." Grace let out a soft, tired laugh. "That sounds like something a PR person would say." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe, or maybe it is something a volunteer would say." "A volunteer?" she repeated. He nodded. "I work with the foundation, just helping where I can." There was something about his tone that hinted at more, but she was too drained to question it. The nurse entered, checked her vitals, and left a tray of water and soup. Ethan stayed, hands in his pockets, gaze drifting to the city lights beyond the window. For a while, silence filled the room. Comfortable, not awkward. The kind of silence that allowed two strangers to breathe the same air without needing to speak. When he finally turned back, he said quietly, "You should take the week off. Rest. The foundation will cover your medical bills." Her eyes widened. "What?" "No. You do not have to." "I already spoke to your supervisor," he interrupted gently. He agreed. "Focus on getting better." Grace felt her throat tighten. No one had spoken to her that kindly in months. She whispered, "Thank you, really." Ethan nodded once and started toward the door, then paused. "I never got your full name." "Grace," she said softly. "Grace Miller." He repeated it, as if testing the sound. "Grace, that suits you." "Loco." When the door closed behind him, Grace stared at the space he had occupied. Her pulse was still unsteady, but now for a different reason. She reached for the glass of water, and her wrist felt strangely bare. Her silver bracelet, the one engraved, "For every heartbeat, keep painting," was gone. She searched the sheets, her nightstand, the floor. Nothing. Panic pricked her chest, but then she remembered the way he had looked down at her on the ballroom floor, his hands trembling, his eyes fixed on hers. A quiet realization spread through her. He must have found it. She exhaled slowly, letting herself smile for the first time in a long while. Outside, the city hummed beyond the glass, alive and vast. Somewhere out there, the man who had carried her from the marble floor was walking beneath the same lights, holding the small silver bracelet that connected them, without either of them yet understanding why. And for the first time since that night, Grace felt something she had not felt in years, the fragile, flickering start of hope. A week passed before Grace gathered enough courage to return to the world outside the hospital walls. The air in Manhattan was crisp that morning, the kind that tasted faintly of metal and rain. She walked slowly, still a little weak, the weight of recent events pressing on her chest more than her illness ever did. Her company had given her temporary leave, but she could not sit still at home. Bills were piling up, and the fear of losing her job haunted her more than exhaustion. She wanted to thank the man who had saved her, the volunteer named Ethan, yet she had no way of contacting him. The hospital records did not show his full details, and no one at the PR agency seemed to know who he really was. She only remembered the way his eyes softened when he said her name, Grace, like it mattered. That afternoon, she returned to the Hale Foundation building downtown. The marble lobby was elegant but quiet, lined with glass panels etched with donors' names. Grace clutched a small gift bag, a handwritten thank you note, and a box of homemade cookies. It felt silly, almost childish, but gratitude often does. At the reception desk, a woman smiled politely. "Good afternoon, how may I help you?" "I am looking for Ethan," Grace said. "He said he volunteers here. I just wanted to thank him." "Lie." The receptionist blinked, then tilted her head slightly, as if weighing whether Grace was joking. "Do you mean Mr. Ethan Hale?" "Yes," Grace replied, her brows furrowed. "That is his last name, right? Hale." The woman's polite smile widened into recognition. "Of course. One moment, please." She turned the monitor toward Grace, revealing a large digital poster looping on the screen, a Forbes cover with Ethan's face. The headline read, "Ethan Hale, the heir who wants to redefine charity." Todo. Grace's heart stopped. He was not just a volunteer. He was the son of Marcus Hale, the billionaire whose name stood on every plaque, every building in this city's philanthropic world. The same man who had carried her from the ballroom floor. For a full minute she could not move. The air seemed thinner, heavier. Her pulse echoed in her ears. The receptionist spoke again, gentle but formal. "Would you like me to let Mr. Hale know you are here?" Grace shook her head quickly. "No, thank you. Please do not. I just wanted to drop this off." She placed the small gift bag on the counter, forcing a polite smile before turning toward the exit. Outside, the cold wind cut through her coat. Her thoughts raced faster than her footsteps. Everything about that night replayed in her mind. The way he had hidden his last name, how calm he had been, how easily he moved people with his voice. She had thought he was simply kind. But now the gesture looked different under the harsh light of reality. "He is a Hale," she thought bitterly. "He probably helps dozens of people every week. I was just one more act of charity to make a good headline." Still, something inside her refused to believe that. She remembered the tremor in his hands, the way he whispered, "Stay with me." That was not performance. That was real. When she reached her apartment, she placed her hospital bracelet on the table and sat in silence. Her life and his belonged to two entirely different worlds. She was a contract employee living paycheck to paycheck. He was a millionaire heir photographed under chandeliers. The idea of them even speaking again felt absurd. But that night, as she sorted through her mail, a plain envelope slipped from between the bills. Inside was a handwritten note on Hale Foundation stationery. "Grace, I found something that belongs to you. Would you let me return it in person?" Below the signature was a small printed line. "Hale Foundation Office. Thursday at 3 p.m. Grace stared at the note, her pulse quickening. She had not told him where she lived. How did he know? Then she remembered the hospital forms, her emergency contact details, her PR file. Of course he had access to those. She turned the paper over, her fingers trembling. A faint indentation ran across the back, the outline of something circular pressed against the page. Her silver bracelet. For a long moment Grace just sat there, the city lights flickering against her window. Confusion and curiosity twisted together in her chest. Maybe he had only wanted to return the bracelet. Maybe it was simple courtesy. But deep down, she knew this meeting would not be simple at all. Thursday arrived with a drizzle that made the city blur behind thin layers of rain. Grace stood outside the glass doors of the Hale Foundation, clutching her umbrella like a shield. Her pulse beat too fast, and she almost turned away twice before forcing herself inside. The receptionist recognized her instantly. "Mr. Hale is expecting you, Miss Miller," she said with a warm smile. Those words felt strange in Grace's ears. "Mr. Hale is expecting you." As if she belonged here. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent except for the sound of her heart. When the doors opened, she was greeted not by a corporate boardroom, but by a wide, sunlit office filled with framed photographs of community projects, children painting murals, volunteers rebuilding homes, families hugging at food drives. It felt human, not sterile. Ethan stood near the window, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up, watching the city through streaks of rain. When he turned, the same calm warmth from that night filled the room. "I am glad you came," he said. Grace nodded, unsure what to say. He walked to his desk, opened a small velvet pouch, and placed something in her palm. Her breath caught. The silver bracelet, polished, intact. The engraving still faintly visible. "For every heartbeat, keep painting." "I thought it might mean something to you," he said. Grace closed her fingers around it. "It does. Thank you for finding it. I kept it because—" He paused, searching for words. "That night reminded me why this foundation exists. I see too many people who donate but never feel. You were the first person in a long time who reminded me what compassion looks like when it is real." Grace frowned slightly. "I do not think I did anything special. I just collapsed." Ethan smiled. "Maybe. But sometimes it takes someone falling for others to wake up." A brief silence settled between them, gentle, not uncomfortable. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance. Grace cleared her throat. "You could have told me who you were." "I could have," he admitted, "but I wanted you to see me as a person, not as a last name. I get enough of that already." She met his gaze. "And now that I do know who you are?" He studied her expression for a long moment before replying, "Now, I am hoping you will still talk to me." Her lips curved into a quiet smile, but she did not answer. Ethan reached for a folder on his desk and handed it to her. "There is something I would like you to look at. We are launching a new outreach program, Heartbeat art therapy workshops for children recovering from heart conditions. We want to partner with local artists, hospitals, and community centers. Grace blinked, surprised. That is incredible. We need someone who understands both media and empathy, he said. Someone who knows what it feels like to fight for one more heartbeat. I would like that person to be you. Her mind went blank. Me? I am not qualified for that kind of role. Come. Ethan shook his head. You are exactly qualified. The program needs heart, not a title. Grace looked down at the bracelet in her hand. The metal felt cool, but her chest felt warm. She thought of her mother, of hospital nights, of the years she had put her own dreams aside. Maybe this was her chance to build something meaningful. Think about it, he added, walking her toward the door. No rush. I just wanted you to know that the offer is real. She paused at the threshold. Why me, Ethan, out of everyone you could choose? He smiled faintly. Because when I carried you that night, I realized something. You did not look fragile. You looked brave. For the first time, Grace could not find words. She only nodded, slipping the bracelet back onto her wrist as she stepped into the elevator. The doors closed slowly, reflecting her own startled face in the metal panel. Her world had shifted again, from survival to possibility. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered like 1,000 tiny heartbeats pulsing in the dark, as if the entire skyline was whispering one truth she could no longer ignore. Something in her life had begun to change quietly, but irreversibly. 2 weeks later, Grace walked through the revolving glass doors of the Hale Foundation, once again this time as part of the team. The smell of fresh paint and coffee mixed in the morning air as staff hurried through the hallways, carrying folders and tablets. Her name was on a temporary badge clipped to her blazer. Grace Miller, Project Consultant, Heartbeat Art Initiative. It still felt unreal. Just a month ago, she was barely keeping her job at the PR agency. Now she was standing in the heart of one of the city's most powerful philanthropic networks, working beside the very man who had saved her life. Ethan greeted her at the main conference room, sleeves rolled up as usual. "Welcome to day one," he said. "You ready to change the world?" She smiled nervously. "I will try not to ruin anything." "You cannot ruin something that does not exist yet," he replied. "You are helping to build it." The meeting began with discussions about hospital partnerships and community art grants. Grace listened intently, her notebook already half full of ideas. She noticed how Ethan treated every staff member with the same quiet respect, regardless of title. Yet every now and then, when his gaze met hers, something unspoken lingered in the air, a mix of curiosity, gratitude, and something else neither dared to name. During a break, Grace stepped into the hallway, gazing out at the city through the tall glass windows. It was strange being here again, surrounded by luxury yet feeling closer to purpose than ever before. A voice behind her broke the silence. "It suits you, you know." She turned to see Ethan leaning casually against the doorframe. "What does?" she asked. "Being here, doing something that matters." Grace smiled faintly. "It feels bigger than me. I'm just trying to keep up." "You are doing more than that," he said softly. "You make people listen. That is rare." Before she could reply, a woman in a red blazer approached a communications manager named Vanessa, whose smile did not reach her eyes. "Mr. Hale, the press team is ready for your interview," she said. Then her gaze slid to Grace. "You must be the new consultant. I heard about you." Grace extended a polite hand. "Nice to meet you." Vanessa's handshake was brief. Of course. Everyone's talking about the gala night. It is quite a story. Ethan's expression hardened slightly. "That is enough, Vanessa. We have work to do." Vanessa's smile remained, but her eyes sparkled with quiet amusement as she turned away. Grace exhaled slowly. She had felt this before: the scrutiny, the judgment that came from people who assumed the worst. Later that afternoon, as they reviewed project sketches in his office, Ethan noticed her distraction. "Ignore her," he said simply. "Some people see rumors as currency." Grace shook her head. She is not wrong to wonder. A girl collapses in a ballroom, and suddenly she has an office next to the boss. It does not look great. Ethan leaned back, watching her carefully. "You earned this position. Anyone who spends 5 minutes working with you can see that." She hesitated. "But they do not see that. They only see you and me." For a moment, neither spoke. The faint hum of rain returned against the windows, just like the day they had first met here. Ethan broke the silence. "If it becomes too much, say the word. I will fix it." Grace looked up, eyes steady. You cannot fix people's opinions, Ethan. You can only prove them wrong. Lowenter. He smiled at that, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Then we will do exactly that. By evening, the staff had gone, leaving the office quiet except for the city lights flickering below. Grace gathered her papers, preparing to leave. Ethan was still by the window, the glow of the skyline reflecting off his watch. "Grace," he said suddenly, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not fainted that night?" She turned, considering. Maybe our worlds would have stayed where they belonged apart. He nodded, and maybe that would have been a shame. Her heart gave a small, unsteady thump, the same rhythm that had filled the ballroom weeks ago. She slipped her silver bracelet under her sleeve before replying softly, "Good night, Ethan." When she left the building, the rain had stopped again, leaving the pavement glistening like glass. She looked up at the towering Hale Foundation logo illuminated above her, and felt an unfamiliar warmth rising inside her. For the first time in years, Grace was not just surviving. She was part of something that mattered, and someone was starting to see her for who she truly was. The following week, the Hale Foundation hosted its first internal presentation for the Heartbeat Art Project. The conference room buzzed with conversation and the faint clicking of laptop keys. A projector hummed softly in the corner, casting colorful charts across the wall. Grace stood near the front of the room, hands clasped together, waiting for her turn to present. Her heart thudded painfully beneath her blouse, not from illness this time, but from nerves. This was the first time she would speak directly to the Foundation's senior board members. Ethan was seated near the end of the long mahogany table. When she glanced his way, he gave a small nod of encouragement. It was enough to steady her. Grace took a deep breath. "Heartbeat Art," she began, "is not about funding or publicity. It is about children who wake up every day fighting to keep their hearts beating and giving them a way to express what that feels like through art." As she spoke, the room quieted. Her words carried the calm of someone who understood pain and turned it into something beautiful. She shared stories of her own hospital experiences, the way a simple brushstroke once helped her breathe through fear. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment, then a wave of applause followed. Even the senior board members, who rarely smiled, were nodding approvingly. After the meeting, Ethan approached her as staff began packing up. "You were brilliant," he said simply. Grace exhaled in relief. "I was terrified. My hands were shaking the entire time." "Lokong." "Good," he said with a small grin. "It means you cared." For the first time, she laughed freely in his presence. It felt natural, easy, like breathing, but the warmth between them did not go unnoticed. Across the room, Vanessa watched with narrowed eyes, whispering something to another colleague. Grace pretended not to see, but a knot formed in her stomach. Rumors were already starting to spread. That evening, while she packed her bag, Ethan lingered in the hallway. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. They stepped into his office. The rain had returned, tapping gently against the windows. "I want you to come with me to the Children's Hospital tomorrow," Ethan said. "We are starting the pilot workshop for Heartbeat Art. I think the kids would respond to you." Grace hesitated. "Are you sure that is a good idea? After today, people already think I am He cut her off gently. "People will always think something. Let them. What matters is the work." "Koruda." She studied his face for a long moment. He looked sincere, almost hopeful. "All right," she said finally. "Tomorrow." The next day, the pediatric wing of St. Clair's Hospital was filled with the smell of disinfectant and faint laughter. Dozens of small canvases were set on tables, surrounded by bright markers and brushes. The children, some with oxygen tubes and monitors attached, looked eager but shy. Grace knelt beside a little girl named Lily, who was missing a front tooth. "What do you want to paint?" she asked. "A heart," Lily said. "But not the pink kind. I want mine to look strong." Grace smiled. "Then we will make it strong together." She guided the girl's hand as she brushed wide streaks of red and gold. Around the room, parents watched with misty eyes. Ethan stood near the doorway, arms crossed, observing quietly. For once, the man who lived among million-dollar decisions seemed perfectly content just watching color bloom on cheap paper. After the workshop, one of the hospital directors approached Ethan. "Your new consultant is quite something," he said. "The kids adore her." Ethan's gaze followed Grace as she cleaned brushes, her laughter echoing softly down the hall. "Yes," he said under his breath, "they are not the only ones." When the children waved goodbye, Grace slipped her silver bracelet back into place and turned toward him. "You were right. she said. "This is what it is supposed to feel like." He nodded slowly. "This is why we do it." As they left the hospital together, the evening light reflected off the glass windows, bathing them both in a soft golden glow. Neither spoke during the drive back, but the silence between them had changed. It was no longer the silence of strangers. It was something tender, unspoken, and dangerously close to something they could both feel, but neither dared to name. The following week, the Hale Foundation held a large press event to announce the official launch of Heartbeat Art. Reporters filled the lobby, cameras flashing as donors and board members gathered for speeches. The excitement in the air was undeniable, but Grace felt a quiet unease building in her chest. She had spent the entire morning preparing presentation materials, double-checking the schedules, and making sure the hospital partnership documents were correct. Yet whispers followed her wherever she went, small, sharp fragments of gossip that cut deeper than she wanted to admit. "She is the girl from the GALA. She must have a connection. No one gets this close to Ethan Hale without a reason." Grace tried to ignore them, focusing on her work, but the words clung to her like static. When the event began, Ethan stepped onto the small stage to address the crowd. His voice carried calm confidence as he spoke about hope, recovery, and compassion. Grace stood among the staff, proud yet tense, knowing every camera lens could swing toward her at any second. Halfway through the speech, she noticed Vanessa standing near the media table, whispering to a journalist. A bad feeling settled in her stomach. Moments later, she saw the headline appear on a live news ticker above the crowd. "Mystery woman from GALA collapse now works beside Millionaire heir." The room buzzed instantly. Phones lifted, flashes erupted, and a low wave of murmurs swept across the audience. Ethan hesitated mid-sentence, catching sight of the display. His jaw tightened, but he continued his speech, finishing it with steady composure. As the applause faded, Grace slipped quietly out the side door, her heart racing. The cold air outside hit her like a wall. She leaned against the stone column, trying to catch her breath. All the doubts she had buried came rushing back. The door opened behind her. "Grace." It was Ethan. His voice was low, calm, but there was frustration beneath it, not at her, but at the situation. "I did not know that article was coming," he said. "Someone leaked it." "I know who did," she whispered. "It does not matter. It just proves what everyone already thinks, that I do not belong here." "That is not true," Ethan said firmly. "You belong here because you earned it. You belong here because you care." She shook her head. "It is easy for you to say that. You will still have your foundation, your name. I will only have a headline." Ethan stepped closer, his expression softening. "Do not let them define you by one moment. Let them see who you really are." Grace looked up at him, eyes wet but steady. "Maybe I should step away for a while. Let things calm down." He hesitated, then nodded slowly, understanding her resolve. "If that is what you need, I will not stop you. But know this, I believe in you, Grace, and that will not change." For a moment, the world was quiet, except for the hum of city traffic. Then she turned and walked away, the bracelet on her wrist catching the last light of the afternoon. Behind her, Ethan watched until she disappeared into the crowd, his hand unconsciously touching his chest, right where her head had rested the night he first held her. Days turned into weeks, and the glow of the Heartbeat Art launch faded into silence. Grace had resigned quietly from the Hale Foundation, leaving behind her access card and a handwritten note for Ethan that simply said, "Thank you for believing in me." She returned to the small studio apartment she once shared with her mother, surrounded by unfinished canvases and the scent of turpentine. Without the daily rush of work, the noise in her life disappeared, but so did her sense of purpose. Each morning she painted. At first, the colors were muted grays, browns, a hint of blue that never seemed to dry right. But one evening, while mixing shades of red, she caught herself thinking of the children at St. Clair's Hospital, of the girl named Lily who had painted a strong heart. Grace smiled through tears. She picked up her brush and began again. This time, the canvas came alive. Meanwhile, at the Hale Foundation, the scandal had blown over, but the emptiness remained. Ethan threw himself into work, yet every time he entered the conference room, he caught himself glancing toward the empty seat where Grace used to sit. The silver bracelet she had once lost now rested on his desk, a constant reminder of the woman who had turned his world from structure into meaning. One afternoon, during a board meeting, a staff member announced, "Sir, the Heartbeat Art exhibit is opening next week at the Downtown Community Center. It is the one Grace Miller has been curating independently." Ethan froze. She continued it? Yes, the man replied. Apparently, she used her savings to rent the space. Local children from St. Clair's are showing their paintings. Ethan excused himself before the meeting ended. The night of the exhibition arrived. The community center was small but full of warmth, string lights, laughter, the smell of acrylic paint and popcorn. Families crowded around easels displaying colorful hearts, stars, and faces full of joy. Grace stood near the entrance, greeting parents with quiet pride. Her hair was tied back, a smudge of blue paint still on her wrist. When she turned, she froze. Ethan was standing at the door, hands in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on her. I heard there was an art show that could make a grown man feel something again, he said softly. Grace blinked back tears. You came. Of course I did. You made this happen. She gestured toward the paintings. They did. I just gave them brushes. He smiled. You gave them hope, and you gave me perspective. They walked together through the rows of artwork, stopping before one piece, a red and gold heart with bold strokes. On the corner of the frame was a small card that read, "For every heartbeat that keeps fighting." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver bracelet, polished and shining under the string lights. I think this belongs to you, he said. Grace shook her head gently. Keep it. You needed it more than I did. He looked at her for a long time, his voice low. Then maybe it means we both kept fighting. As the lights dimmed for the closing remarks, applause filled the room. Ethan turned to her, his eyes soft but certain. You proved them wrong, Grace. Every single one of them. Tall. And for the first time in months, she felt whole again, not because of where she was, but because of who she had become. 3 months later, the Hale Foundation unveiled a brand new initiative in partnership with Grace's program. The banner above the entrance read, "The Heartbeat Art Center, a place where compassion meets creation." The event was modest compared to the grand galas of the past, yet it carried more life than any ballroom ever had. Children from St. Clair's Hospital stood proudly beside their artwork, their laughter echoing through the spacious hall. Reporters, community leaders, and volunteers filled the room. But the tone was different now, warmer, more human. Grace walked through the exhibition, greeting familiar faces. She was no longer the nervous assistant in borrowed heels. She was the director of a program that had grown from her sketchbook and a single act of kindness. Her mother, now healthier, stood near the front row, smiling with quiet pride. Across the room, Ethan was giving a short speech. His voice carried easily through the hall, confident but soft. When this program began, he said, it started with one person who reminded us that charity is not about wealth. It is about empathy, about seeing people not as causes, but as hearts. Grace Miller showed us that. Applause rippled through the crowd. Grace felt her chest tighten as their eyes met across the room. After the event, the crowd thinned, leaving the lights dim and soft. Ethan approached her near one of the large framed paintings, a piece painted by the children, showing 2 intertwined hearts, one gold and one silver. You did it, he said quietly. Grace smiled. We did it. You believed in this, when no one else did. He shook his head. You believed first. I just followed. Chubsy wa. She looked around the hall, at the children still laughing, at the parents holding hands, at the donors who had put away their phones for once and were simply watching. I used to think survival was enough, she said. Now I know life has to mean something more. Ethan stepped closer, his tone gentler now. You gave it meaning. For me too. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was not a diamond ring, but a simple silver band, engraved with the same words as her bracelet. For every heartbeat. Keep painting. Grace gasped softly, her eyes filling with tears. I do not need a grand stage or cameras, he said. I just need to know that from now on, whatever happens, we keep building this together. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, together. T-yo-yo. When she slipped the ring onto her finger, the crowd that had begun to gather nearby broke into applause. The lights above flickered gently, casting a golden hue over them both. Outside, through the glass windows, New York shimmered with evening light. The skyline pulsed like a living heart, steady, luminous, alive. As the music swelled softly from the speakers, Ethan took her hand. You fainted that night, he whispered, smiling, and I have been holding you ever since. T-R-da. Grace laughed through her tears. Then I guess it is your turn to never let go. And under the glowing lights of the Heartbeat Art Center, Two lives that had collided by chance finally found their rhythm, proof that one act of kindness could change not only a night, but a lifetime.